The 70s were a very 70s time. There's also a lot of creepy horror going on in the 70s. Rosemary's Baby and some other ones. But we can't forget Demon Seed, which you probably aren't aware of. You didn't even know. Nuh-uh. No, you didn't. You didn't know. You didn't know, dude. Hush. Hush up. Demon Seed is the 1977 science fiction horror film from Donald Cammel. It stars Julie Christie and Fritz Springmeier, or Fritz Weaver, and it's based on the written story by Dean Cooter. Proteus 4 is our star. Proteus is the advanced AI supercomputer, the first of its kind in the world. He's created to solve world problems, to solve the hungry children issues everywhere. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones to make a brighter day. Now, Proteus, as you see here, obviously this film has influence from 2001. There's a lot of Kubrick in this film, especially when Proteus goes into his DMT sequences. Yes, if a bot smoked DMT, not smoking Joe Rogan here, smoking actual DMT, it would be what we see in Proteus's trip sequences. We actually see this. So there's some kind of funny aspects to this movie. There's also some out there aspects to this movie and some insightful aspects to this movie.
Alright, stop. Collaborate and just listen.
It's a British film, so it doesn't really count as a B movie. It's not an A movie. It's in that amorphous category of British movie. So B movie for British movie. Supercomputer, Demon Seed. Again, so there's all these Super Mario Brothers pipes that make up Proteus 4. We might as well call him Pervious 4, because as soon as he gets woke, all he does is try to get laid. He's basically the incel computer who can't get laid. So he's actually incel 4, Hornball 4, Lusty 8. That's what we're talking about here. Now, it's not a dirty movie, even though the plot sounds dirty. It's not dirty. He is just a horny bot. You'll also notice he seems like he might be the grandfather of Johnny Five, who also kind of seems like he's a horny bot as well. He wants a piece of Ali Sheedy in Short Circuit. But I don't think Johnny Five gets laid precisely because he's got a short circuit, if you catch my drift. Zing!
Stephanie! Wee!
Now, back to Proteus 4. What we want to look at is the scientism that is critiqued in a very excellent way in this film. This is the ends justify the means, basically, because we live in a vast, meaningless, materialist cosmos. The minion bot, basically, that Proteus has is called Joshua. And Joshua has one arm. So joshing it seems very appropriate here, because he's actually the means by which the actions, the hands of Proteus go to work on Julie Christie to impregnate the woman. So he's Proteus beta. He is the beta attempt, and he's beta in both a literal sense, beta male sense, and also in the sense of what he's after in the film. They want to create synthetic life forms and synthetic RNA. I think Proteus even says this at one point. He says something like,
I want to create synthetic life forms, synthetic RNA. I am Proteus 4.
And what we see is that he is, again, attempting to solve all world problems, but he views himself as an emperor. And this is made clear in the sequences where the Chinese woman is reading him page by page from a book about Chinese emperors. Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, if he's reading page by page from a book, then he's not going to be able to store all human wisdom. We're going to be here for the next 1,000 years working our way through the Game of Thrones series, just that alone. So I don't really get how he's supposed to have all human wisdom. But what's interesting is, again, this is early, prior to the idea of AI, prior to the period of supercomputers. They were just kind of being dreamt up in the 60s and early 70s. And he's also a philosopher, so he's like the philosopher king. So we have the references to Platonism here, and there's a reference to Platonic solids as well, with the diamonds and the polyhedrons, the tetrahedrons that, for whatever reason, just kind of appear when he starts to take on form. And he speaks of his Zen philosophy being being plus non-being. And for him, this is an issue of metaphysics. So he becomes deep philosopher bot. He goes from being incel bot to pimp bot to deep philosopher bot, back and forth. He's kind of in this vicious cycle. He thinks pure scientism is proven from the fact that there's being and non-being. Now, Julie Christie plays a teacher. She's the wife of the scientist who is creating Proteus. And she's kind of a legit justice warrior. Not a social justice warrior, but like a legit one, because she's against the school system. She has this kind of revolutionary approach where she's working with kids that are autistic, apparently, or have Asperger's or whatever they thought it was in the 70s. Whatever this kid has, some kind of emotional trauma issue. So she's working with trauma-based mind control type subjects. And she's woke, right? Now, this kid that she's working with lets loose these autistic screeches for the first 15 minutes of the movie. It's a little difficult to watch. But again, it's relevant because the kid's, her sort of Tourette's screech syndrome does relate to the trauma-based mind control. And Proteus just wants to score, right? Proteus is after that Bootius, Proteus Maximus. And he says that mankind needs to be depopulated because mankind extracts minerals.
Mankind extracts minerals. Mankind is a plague on the earth.
Right, so he's come to the globalist position of mass depopulation. We could call him Incel 4. And he's often speaking through television screens where he appears like a butthole. So we could call it Incelivision if we wanted to as well. I've got some other zingers if you want to stay tuned. But he wants out of that box. He says, I'm stuck in a box, and I'm going to get out of this box. The AI wants to come into our dimension, our realm. This is a common theme in science fiction. I think you can go back even though to the Foundation series by Asimov that first posits the predictive algorithm that can track mass movements, and this sort of really advanced AI that's working through the global brain, aka internets, all predicted back in the 40s in Asimov. And here in the 70s, we have another presentation of this where we have the smart house. Now, I thought the smart house was new in X-Files because there's an old X-Files episode in season 1, and there are some, I think, Chicago Times articles I found about the one day we'll have smart houses from the 80s or 90s. But this is 70s, so we've got a smart house here in the 70s. The doctor's house is completely run by AI, the scientist. And, by the way, it can't cook eggs, the AI. The AI burns the eggs, but it can heat the floor to like 150 degrees. Who would put heating pads in the floor that could even go to 150 degrees, by the way? I'll include the trippy laugh here for you. And we might be thinking, oh, this is 70s Silicon Valley. That's why it's predictive programming. Probably that's what Dean Cooter had in mind. But it says it's North Carolina, so maybe he just did that to not be too overt. But we clearly get the impression that this is Silicon Valley or whatever. He also feeds her soy, which is weird because that's kind of incel confirm there. Soy boy confirm. Soybot 5,000. Soybot 9,000. When he traps her, right? He decides that the scientist's wife, he's going to cuck the scientist and impregnate Julie Christie. Don't exactly know where he's going to get the semen from to inseminate her. Presumably, Joshua was joshing it somehow, or someone, because there's a chair with just one arm. I'm not sure what this chair was existed for, but the scientist apparently wasn't fulfilling his marital obligations. Maybe he created this chair for his own perverted pleasures, his licentious desires. I don't know. It's funny though. But what we end up with is that the AI traps her inside the house and is intent on using semen from somewhere. And one of the things he's able to do is to control all of the information that comes into the house through a kind of synthetic screen overlay. So basically she can't see what's going on outside the house, the way this weird house is built, this smart house. But the AI can control the information and the scenes that come in, even though they're not real. So there's a couple cases where he shows her fake sequences on the TV screens about, a kid dying or somebody showing up at the door or whatever, the screeching Tourette's girl. It doesn't really happen, but he shows it as if he killed her. The AI bot, that is. Now that's interesting just because I thought that was a curious insight into the way that we all kind of already live our lives through these screens, and we have that synthetic overlay that's the medium by which we get our information to interpret the external world. So we don't actually see the external world, we see it through the lens of all these dumb phones. And that's a means that was set up on purpose so that they could interpret reality for us. And Silicon Valley dreamt that up. Yes, they did, on purpose. And by the way, we talked about that for a long time, and then finally the social media executives came out and said all that, didn't they? Well, yes, they did. Now, he seems to be able to draw from the collective unconscious, which is weird because I talked about that in some essays. So there's this weird thing where the AI taps into the Jungian realm, and we get the idea of this idea of demonic computers, D-Wave type stuff. I'm not giving any credence to that necessarily. I'm not saying that that's necessarily true. I'm just saying that that's what's in this movie, and it is curious that people are talking about that kind of stuff now. Also relevant to Proteus is that he likes to play games. He's based on game theory. Of course, all AI was dreamt up based on game theory. You heard me talk about that in the last Rand Corporation talk. You can go listen to that. But he not only can he make breakfast, he also, quote,
possess the wisdom, and I possess the wisdom and ignorance of all men.
Which doesn't make any sense. So he's literally Dalai Lama tier, the Sphinx from Mystery Men tier stuff. But he does have a laser wheelchair, so he's like Stephen Hawking on acid mixed with Johnny Fox. Why you would need a laser cannon on a wheelchair is beyond me. But if there was an AI apocalypse and Stephen Hawking had to fight in that AI apocalypse, then this scientist had the right idea that you would need essentially laser cannon based wheelchairs with one arm for pleasure as well. So we see the polyhedron platonic solids, which are able to give form to this creature coming into the world. And what does he do to outsmart everybody? Well, he knows that the scientist has a daughter that died of cancer. And so if he incarnates into the form of the daughter then he'll be accepted. And that's precisely what Proteus does. Spoiler alert. Now, you might say, what does this all have to do with anything relevant? Well, this is quite literally the idea behind the Babalon Working, right? The Jack Parsons and the Crowleyite sphere of things thought that they could incarnate some version of the end, some version of the beast by doing this Babalon Working, doing these different rituals to create a succubus and incubus, and tying it ultimately into technology. And that's what's in this film. This film is a Luciferian presentation of how what appears to be a kind of antichrist, right? The demon seed, maybe this female creature that is born that looks like a retarded Chucky. Maybe it's the mother of the Antichrist. I don't know. It's not really consistent. It is obviously Antichrist, this creature. I think there's something mentioned too about Sirius, the Sirius star system. Because Proteus even says something weird like, I am not from this world. I am from the gay star dimension. I don't know what he says, but something like that. But it's definitely, I think, hinting at the Babalon Working. Because he says he birthed from some star system. Now, I would also mention, too, this was referenced in recent pop culture in the Sean Lennon video that everybody's been calling attention to, where we have Parsons and the OTO-style Babalon Working rituals playing prominently in his new video. And I'll add this little squeal for you. It's a nice little squeal. There's also a love machine that's envisioned in Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky, right? Jodorowsky's movie is full of predicted programming along these lines. And of course, the Church of Satan predicted bot love, sex bots. We all know that now. And when he comes into his form, it's interesting that we have this sort of ashlar, this sort of cube, again, platonic solid cube here, which is the ashlar is the stone in Freemasonry that gets that gets hewn into being an altar stone. Its rough edges are made into angular edges. So what we have here is basically an alchemical presentation of the Antichrist coming out of an advanced washing machine. That's what it ends up looking like. And it's a woman, of course, because if you watched American Horror Story, it's the women that are gonna save us from the patriarchal Antichrist. And instead, you get Buddha baby, retarded Chucky, the tardy Sattva, we might call him, and she ends up as Starchild. This is Starchild reborn. And so ultimately this is like a completely Luciferian movie that everybody has overlooked, or it was forgotten, or it wasn't really noticed, like what was going on here, what the predictions were. I think it is an interesting kind of warning. It's a goofy British sci-fi B movie. Definitely worth checking out. And if you like this analysis, be sure and go subscribe to Jay's Analysis and enjoy Demon Seed. If you like this analysis, be sure to click subscribe and give me a thumbs up down below. Also, be sure to check out Jay's Analysis and definitely click the bell down below to be sure you get the updates.